Good morning. Welcome to this class on neuroscience of human movement. This is part 8 of the discussion on primary motor cortex. So, in today's class we will be talking about tracts that connect from the cortex to the spinal cord. This is called as tracts to the spinal cord, but there are many. One of this is that one, corticospinal tract. There are tracts that originate in the cortex at the layer 5 of the cortex and proceed on to either the brainstem or to the spinal cord. This tract is called as a pyramidal tract. So, then we need to discuss the importance of the crossing over of the pyramidal tract, also called as decussation. What do we mean by tract? Tract refers to a bundle of neurons. Okay. So, this usually when we are talking about a pyramidal tract, it contains neurons whose cell bodies lie in the cortex and whose axons travel either to subcortical structures or to the spinal cord. Okay. The pathway that they take and they travel as a group or as a bundle, right. So, that is called as a tract. Okay. So, there are multiple tracts of interest. First of all, before we proceed, let us discuss the previous case. So, what are the various regions, motor related regions in the cortex? Let us remind ourselves of this. One is the primary motor cortex, M1, the primary motor cortex. Then the SMA proper, the supplementary motor area proper, is it not? It is also called as area F3, is it not? Then the pre supplementary motor area, then the dorsal premotor area, then the pre-dorsal premotor area, then the ventral premotor area. So, the pre-SMA is area F6, the dorsal premotor area is F2 and the pre-dorsal premotor area is F7 and the ventral premotor area is divided into two areas F4 and F5. Now, where do the tracts that go to the spinal cord originate? What are the regions? Among these, which ones give rise to tracts that go to the spinal cord? Among the motor regions, the primary motor cortex, the supplementary motor area, some in the dorsal premotor area and some in the ventral premotor area. So, that means the pre supplementary motor area and the pre-dorsal premotor area do not send their tracts to the spinal cord directly, but rather they send indirect projections to spinal cord, and that makes sense from our previous discussions. We said that these are areas that are going to bring context specific responses, whereas if an area is directly projecting to the spinal cord, that is that can be approximately considered to be the last decision that is already made. So, these areas, the pre supplementary area and the pre-dorsal premotor cortex project indirectly, not directly. Also, the notion that the primary motor cortex is the only region that projects to the spinal cord and to the brainstem, and in the good old days that used to be called as the final common path. Okay. This is also wrong. M1 is not the final common path, but rather there are many sources of corticospinal projections. There are many sources, more than one. That means, so M1 is a major contributor, but it is not M1 alone. There are others such as supplementary motor area and dorsal premotor area, ventral premotor area, etc. So, M1 is not the final common pathway to the spinal cord, and these projections from the regions from these regions that are discussed go to two different zones, either to the spinal cord. So, from the cortex it could go to the spinal cord or to the brainstem. Some debate in terminology does exist as to what is called as what. In general, all this tract together, those that project both to the brainstem and to the spinal cord together is called as the pyramidal tract, and that which projects only to the spinal cord is called as corticospinal tract. I am going to talk about that in a bit, and that which projects to the brainstem is called as corticobulbar tract. What is shown in this picture here is the transection of a vertebra showing different projections. Some of these are afferent, some of these are efferent. Here we are only focusing on the efferent pathways. What do you mean by efferent? These are descending pathways. So, what are the descending pathways that are received by the at the level of spinal cord? But note, it is not only the cortex that sends descending pathways to the spinal cord, there are others. What are the others? These are corticospinal tract, okay, that is already discussed, and then what are called as the extra pyramidal system. What do you mean by that? So, the pyramidal tract is one of the major source. So, that is the pyramidal tract. Any other tract that is not including the pyramids is the extra pyramidal tract, that is the rubrospinal tract, that which originates from the red nucleus, the reticulospinal tract, that which originates from the reticular formation, the vestibulospinal tract, the rubrospinal tract is here, the reticulospinal tract is here, and the vestibulospinal tract is here, and the olivospinal tract is here. Vestibulospinal tract start at the originate at the vestibular nuclei, and the olivospinal tract originate at the olives. Note, these are all subcortical structures, is it not? Red nucleus, reticular formation, vestibular nucleus, olives are all subcortical structures. If they originate in the cortex and terminate at the nucleus, if they originate at the cortex and terminate at the spinal cord, that is called as corticospinal tract. If they originate at the cortex and terminate at the brainstem, that is called as corticobulbar tract. If they originate at the subcortical structures and terminate in the spinal cord, these are called as extra pyramidal tract. These are basically those that originate in the red nucleus or rubrospinal tract, those that originate in the reticular formation are the reticulospinal tract, those that originate in the vestibular nuclei are the vestibulospinal tract, and those that originate in the olives the olivospinal tract. Now, what we are not discussing is the ascending pathway. We will discuss that in future, but at least it is clear that the spinal cord is receiving inputs from multiple regions of the brain, some mainly from the cortex and also from subcortical areas, and the cortex itself projects not only to the spinal cord, but also to the brainstem. And so, there is sufficient amount of redundancy. Now, the question is, where do these project and what is their function, right. So, what is the main role of this, right. So, the pyramidal tract itself originates at the precentral areas and the posterior cortex. Now, we said where in the precentral areas it originates, that is basically M1 supplementary motor area, premotor dorsal area and the ventral premotor area, we have seen that. And in the parietal zone, they basically originate at the primary somatosensory cortex and the rostral part of the parietal lobules, both superior and inferior. Okay. Now, the question is what is their function? We will come back to that in a bit. So, this I have discussed, corticospinal tract and the corticobulbar tract. Sometimes the following terminology is used to refer to neurons that control motor function, or the neurons that control motor function in the cortex are sometimes referred to as the upper motor neurons. This has the dubious characteristic to refer that there are motor neurons that are upper, and then there are motor neurons that are lower, and somehow these motor neurons connect with each other, or it is like a string that is connecting and it is pulling. It gives rise to some, it may give rise to some wrong interpretations of what is actually happening, but some frequently textbooks also use this terminology upper motor neurons. What is referred is that whenever we mention upper motor neurons, no such hierarchy is actually mentioned. What is mentioned is that neurons in the cortical areas are called as upper motor neurons, okay. And they start at the cerebral cortex, pass down and crosses the side at the medulla, at the zone called medullary pyramids. But how do they do that? How do they pass down? That we need to see. So, they start at the cortex. So, their cell bodies are in the cortex in area 5, and they pass down via the internal capsule, more specifically the posterior limb of the internal capsule. Okay. Posterior limb of the internal capsule, and they form the cerebral peduncle and then reach the brainstem and the medulla where they form two prominences, two slight bulges like that. These are called as the medullary pyramids, or the pyramids of the medulla, right. So, below that level they cross over to the other side, but not all of them. If there are 100 nerves, about 80 to 90 of them cross over, about 10% of them project on the same side. So, what do I mean by crossover? It has to be clear. So, those neurons that originate from the right side of the motor cortex reach the medullary pyramids on the right side and then cross over to the left side, or about 80% of them cross over to the left side and project to the left side of the body, or the left side of the spinal cord and to the rest of the body, right, through the spinal cord. 10% of these reach the spinal cord in the right side itself and project to the right side of the body itself. Okay. Now, those that originate on the left side of the body, left side of the brain of the cortex, reach the medulla on the left side, and then at the pyramids it cross over to the right side and project, go down to the spinal cord and project and control function of the right side of the body, right. So, this crossing over is called as decussation. We will discuss that in a bit. So, and important to note is that there is a small proportion, agreed that this proportion is small, but there are some projections that go on the same side. These are called as ipsilateral projections, right, ipsilateral projections. This number is small, but it is present, right. Now, this crossing over is called as decussation, we say. Now, a picture showing this pyramidal tract. Note that the pyramidal tract is composed of two, one is the corticospinal tract, the other is the corticobulbar tract. This is shown in red, the pyramidal tract is shown in red here. So, it is coming like that, and then it comes out like that through the cerebral peduncle, okay. And then it is seen here. So, in this view this is not seen here. So, that has been zoomed out and a picture is shown here, where it is shown that those that are coming from that side is going to, if you consider this to be the left and the right half, those that is starting in this half cross over to that half, and those that start at that half cross over to the half. This is not true for all, I said this is about 80 to 90%. So, that is called as pyramidal decussation. Okay. Again once again a picture showing this decussation more clearly. So, this is the decussation that is happening at the lateral cerebrospinal fasciculus. Now, where does that leave us? What does this even mean? Now, important to note is the contributions of these tracts and where they terminate within the spinal cord. So, the following points are noteworthy. Before we summarize, the following points are noteworthy. In lower mammals such as rats, mice or even cats for example, these corticospinal neurons almost always project onto interneurons. In lower mammals, projection is onto the interneurons, which further project to the motor neurons. There is very less amount of direct motor neuronal synapses in lower mammals. In primates though, starting with Prometheans, macaques, great apes, then humans, right. The amount of direct projections to the motor area within the spinal cord increases. So, in primates or in lower primates, some direct projections to motor areas, to motor neurons of the spinal cord. Where are these? We have studied where these are. These are in the ventral nuclei of the spinal cord, is it not? We have said this in the previous classes. And this increases within the primate phylogeny. So, this as you go up within the primate family, as you go up from macaques to great apes to humans, the amount of direct projections increases. Now, also what we have not discussed is the role of the non-cortical projections to the spinal cord. We have not discussed that in this class, we must discuss it in future. These are the rubrospinal, reticulospinal, vestibulospinal pathways. We will discuss that in future. But within the corticospinal case, in lower mammals there is only direct projections to interneurons. And what happens in primates themselves? Actually what happens in primates is they project to the motor areas, and how do they project? So, one corticospinal neuron projects to neurons, that motor neurons that control a muscle and its agonist, and it indirectly projects or it indirectly inhibits the antagonist. So, for example, if you take the case of biceps, for example, actually this is not true, just an example. If you take the case of biceps, it projects to the biceps brachialis, brachioradialis directly. Suppose as an example, it projects to a muscle and its agonist, or it sends excitatory connections to a muscle and its agonist, and indirectly inhibits through spinal interneurons, it indirectly inhibits the muscle's antagonist. What is the antagonist of biceps? Triceps. Actually in the case of biceps and triceps, we would not expect direct corticospinal projections, because these are relatively proximal muscles, but still this is just an example. So, these projections from the corticospinal region, from the corticospinal tract, in the corticospinal tract, that focus on multiple muscles, not just one muscle, that send projections to motor neurons controlling multiple muscles, constitute a muscle field. Okay. It also inhibits the antagonist of this muscle indirectly through the spinal interneurons. This is true in primates. So, what does this also mean? It is worth thinking about, just taking a minute and thinking about what could this mean. Well, what this means is that if this pathway is compromised for some reason, or if these neurons in the cortex are compromised for some reason, what will happen is that there is going to be less devastating effects in the lower mammals. Why? Because they only receive inputs indirectly from the corticospinal tract. The motor neurons in the lower mammals receive indirect inputs, whereas the primates receive more direct input. So, as you go up the evolutionary table, as you go up, the lesions to specific areas will lead to progressively more devastating effects, which is why in humans, if there is a lesion, the effects are devastating. But the good thing that comes, what is the advantage in humans is that these corticospinal direct projections is what gives rise to the fine control of the more distal parts of the upper limb, or in other words the hand and fingers. Now, that we will discuss in a future class. The point is that with one advantage, there is also a disadvantage. The advantage that comes with direct corticospinal projections is that you are able to get fine control and more dexterity, but that also means that if that area is somehow compromised, or if this tract is somehow compromised, you are going to have a more devastating effect when compared with the lower animals. So, we will stop this discussion here. So, in summary, what we have seen is the pyramidal tract. So, this pyramidal tract is mainly composed of the pyramidal neurons from the cortex originating from multiple areas in the motor and the parietal areas. Also, these has the largest neurons within the cortex. These neurons are called as Betz cells. Okay. And then corticospinal tract. So, the cortex projects onto two areas, the spinal cord and the brainstem. So, these are called as corticospinal tract and the corticobulbar tract. Pyramidal tract crosses over below the level of the medullary pyramids. This is called as decussation. About 80% of the neurons cross over to the other side, about 10% of them project ipsilaterally. Okay. And these projections are directly projecting to the motor areas in primates and humans, and indirectly projecting to the motor areas in the lower mammals. So, with this we come to the end of this class. We will continue this discussion in future classes. So, thank you very much.